What if Obi Wan captured Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones? That's our story for today. Hope you guys enjoy, and let's get right into it. Our story begins on Kamino, as Obi-Wan Kenobi is informing Jedi Masters Yoda and Windu about what he has discovered here. It is far more complicated than any of the Jedi would ever have expected. Obi-Wan reported that the Kaminoans are using a bounty hunter called Jango Fett to create a clone army. Obi-Wan knew this bounty hunter was the one trying to kill Padme, and Windu asked if the clones are part of this plot to kill her as well. Obi-Wan said no, and he continued on by saying that the Kaminoans said that Jedi Master Sifo Dyas was the man who originally placed the order for the clones under the request of the Senate. Windu and Yoda said this was incorrect, and they need to get to the bottom of this mystery, so they requested that Obi-Wan capture the bounty hunter and bring him to Coruscant so they can further question him, learn who is truly behind this. Obi-Wan nodded, ending the message with the Jedi Masters, and he took off through the Kamino facilities, eventually reaching the landing pad as Jango was trying to leave, and Obi-Wan ignited his blade, blocking a few initial blaster shots from Jango's pistol before the bounty hunter flew away on his jetpack. Obi-Wan had to roll away from a few more shots as Jango hid behind a pillar, while Boba started up the ship, firing down at Kenobi. Once more, the Jedi Master had to dive out of the way as a rocket from Jango landed right in front of him. Obi-Wan was now scrambling to his feet as Jango flew down at him, and Obi-Wan managed to get up and kick Jango square in the chest before the two of them engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Jango headbutted Obi-Wan, and the Jedi Master slid across the wet platform. As Jango flew through the air to finish him off, Obi-Wan called his lightsaber back to his hand, and it landed in his hands just in time to cut through the cable, then slice right into Jango's jetpack. Jango spun out of control, slamming into the ledge. Dazed and defeated, he looked up to see Obi-Wan's blue blade in his face, telling him to surrender. Jango would quickly tell Boba to get out of here, saying it was a direct order, and Boba hesitated only a moment before taking off. Obi-Wan spun to kick Jango in the head, knocking him out, then threw a tracking device that just missed Jango's ship as it departed from Kamino. Obi-Wan shook his head, wiping the rain out of his face as he began dragging Jango's body away. Luckily, they were already near the landing pads, and therefore a hangar was nearby, allowing Kenobi to drag Jango into a clone transport and take off into space before anyone was able to notice. He wasn't the greatest pilot, but he could figure out this ship if need be, and so he took off to Coruscant. As Boba Fett reached space, he wondered where to go. He'd never really been alone without Jango in space before. He looked into the ship's destination input to discover that he and his father were supposed to go to Geonosis, likely to meet with Tyrannus. So Boba took off in hyperspace alone for Geonosis, hoping to find Tyrannus and get him to save his father. Jango Fett would eventually wake up in a room that he did not recognize. As his eyes adjusted to the light, he realized he was surrounded by Jedi. Instantly, he realized this must be the Jedi Council that he'd only heard about in stories. The room was quiet, calm, and peaceful. Jango was no fan of the Jedi. They'd fought against his people in the Mandalorian Wars, and though he did not consider himself Mandalorian, he once did, and he would choose Mandalore over the Jedi any day. As he awoke, the first question would come from Mace Windu, and Windu asked Jango who the clone army on Kamino was for. Jango simply said it's for the Jedi, just like he told the Jedi on Kamino. Obi-Wan nodded from one of the corners, confirming that he was told the same. Ki-Adi-Mundi leaned in, asking Jango who hired him. Jango had no real reason to lie. Whatever war or battles were coming were of no interest to him, so he told the Jedi he was hired by a man called Tyrannus. Yoda said that is not a name they were familiar with, and Jango simply shrugged. But now Plo Koon leaned in, saying that Jango's thoughts betray him. He knows who Tyrannus truly is. Jango told the Jedi he's not getting anything more out of him. Truthfully, in this moment, Jango realized now that the Jedi were not a threat, but Tyrannus certainly is. And if he betrays Tyrannus now, then Boba could be in great danger. So Jango would go completely silent, barely listening to whatever questions the Jedi were asking, until eventually, a group of temple guards escorted him down into the temple prison for the night. Obi-Wan would go on to speak with Anakin, telling him to stay on Tatooine with Padme, before re-entering the council. The Jedi were extremely concerned. It was clear to them that this clone army was not created by Sifo Dyas, as they were originally told. The pieces were starting to come together, as they knew Sifo Dyas died right around the time that the army was created. So the leading theory for now was that whoever this Tyrannus person is, killed Sifo Dyas, then went on to create the clone army without ever telling the Jedi. On Geonosis, Boba Fett landed hours ago and eventually found Tyrannus, telling him everything about how Jango was captured on Kamino. This was discouraging for Tyrannus, as Jango knew quite a lot about the true intentions of the clones. Jango knew that it was Tyrannus, Dooku, who created them, and Jango also knows that Dooku is the leader of the Separatists. So Dooku would give Boba a warm smile, ensuring that he would rescue his father. And Dooku would go into a different room, then make a call to a different bounty hunter, Cad Bane, and his mission? Infiltrate the Jedi Temple with schematics from Dooku and kill Jango Fett. Cad Bane and Jango were as close to friends as bounty hunters could really be, but this was the name of the game for Bane, especially after seeing the money that Dooku offered. Inside the Jedi Temple, as the night got later, Mace Windu was having a lot of trouble falling asleep, so instead, he would go into deep meditation. The Force was very dark, and it clouded his vision. He was secretly extremely stressed. He loved the Republic, yet the Republic was falling apart. War seemed imminent, so Windu centered his concentration on the temple, the palace that could always calm him down. The temple was serene, perfect for just feeling the light of the Force. But as Windu felt the swirling force around the temple, something shifted. A disturbance. Windu's eyes shot open as he left his room, running to the temple prison. He knew this disturbance had to be related to Jango. Down inside of his cell, Jango was sitting alone with 2 temple guards in front of him. He was wondering about Boba, and the more Jango waited, the more worried he would become. Part of him wondered if he should just tell the Jedi the truth, find Boba, and escape Coruscant to start a new life with his son. He was more than wealthy enough after all, but suddenly, 2 blaster bolts took out the temple guards before they could even react, and in slow motion, Jango could see a 3rd blast heading right for him. But Mace Windu arrived just in time, using the Force to freeze the blaster bolt in midair, then cutting through the vents to drop Cad Bane to the ground. Mace threw Bane against the wall, and Bane dropped a smoke grenade that made everyone blind except for him as he put on a special pair of goggles. Mace Windu closed his eyes, letting the Force guide him. He felt the Force, felt the temple around him, the light. And Cad Bane pulled out a rifle, aiming at the back of Windu's head. He had a clean shot, and he fired the perfect shot. But Windu was ready, spinning his saber perfectly behind him to deflect the shot right back into Bane's heart, and he dropped to the ground, dead. The smoke cleared, and Mace told Jango he can stop hiding the truth from them. Whoever Jango is protecting is going to come after them no matter what. Jango realized now this was the truth. Dooku clearly sent Bane to kill him. Jango told Windu that if he reveals the truth, then he and his son can go free without the Jedi coming for them. Windu considered this, then agreed. Jango had no personal vendetta against the Jedi. He was simply carrying out bounties. So Jango took a deep breath, telling Windu that Tyrannus is Dooku. The leader of the Separatist droid army has created an army for the Republic. This was deeply troubling, and Windu would call an emergency council meeting. Once everyone gathered, including Obi Wan once again, Jango reiterated what he told Windu. Dooku created this army for the Republic, and the Jedi could tell that Jango was telling the truth. This was a dark time for the Jedi and for the Republic, but the Council knew one thing for certain. If the Jedi act quickly, this war can be ended before it ever truly begins. Jango would be given a ship to go wherever he chooses, and the Jedi were thankful to him for telling the truth. And from here, the Council would assign a few members to go to the Senate, tell them everything they've learned, and another group must go to Kamino, find out exactly why the Kaminoans are working with Dooku. Why would Dooku create an army to oppose the droid army he's seemingly building? Obi Wan, Shakti, Plo Koon, and Coleman Trepper would go to Kamino, while Yoda, Mace Windu, Alpo Rancise, and Evan Peel would go to the Senate. The rest of the council members would remain in the temple, discreetly setting up security measures in case some unforeseen attack occurs. The Jedi were letting go of some arrogance upon finding out that Dooku created their army without them knowing. In the Senate, Interim Senator Jar Jar Binks was giving a small speech, and right as he was about to suggest granting Palpatine emergency powers, Palpatine felt like everything was coming together. He would get these powers, he would start a war with the Separatists, and in due time, he would be able to claim his place as Emperor of the Galaxy. It was all so perfect. But before Binks could offer the emergency powers, a new pod requested to speak, and the 4 Jedi floated to the center, saying they've learned crucial information about this rumored clone army that Palpatine has been speaking of. Everyone gasped, and Senate voices only got louder, until Mas Amedda stood up, calling for everyone to calm down as they listened to what the Jedi have to say. Palpatine stared at them with hatred, but he managed to keep his anger and frustration hidden from the senses of the Jedi, and he calmed himself down, as he prepared to listen to the Jedi. After all, how much could they truly know? But Windu would say that they found the host of this clone army, a bounty hunter called Jango Fett, and upon questioning this bounty hunter, the Jedi have learned a terrible truth. Dooku, the leader of the Separatists, was the one that created this army. Shouts of confusion rang out from the senators, and the Jedi played the recording where he admitted this to the council. Dooku created the army, though they do not know the true purpose of why this has happened. The Jedi said their only theory is that Dooku is a Sith, the ancient enemy of the Jedi, and his goal is to simply cause chaos in the galaxy in order to bring down the Jedi and Republic, while he slowly rises to power. Once more, Mas Amedda had to call for order as Palpatine stood back up to speak. He thanked the Jedi for bringing this information forward, and then said that he and his people will have to investigate these claims before going forward with using the clone army. This is not something Palpatine wanted to do, but what choice did he have? If he went forward with giving the clone army to the Jedi and Republic right now, then he would basically be admitting to working with Dooku. He had to at least pretend to take these claims seriously. And the Senate was dismissed for today, as Palpatine would go to his office, calling to Dooku. He told Dooku that he has failed. The Jedi and Senate now know that the Sith created the clone army, and they must adjust their plans accordingly. Palpatine decided that Dooku must come to Coruscant so they can reassess their plans in person. Dooku agreed, and the two of them would end their call. Palpatine sat in his office alone, and he knew what must happen. Dooku failed. He would have to kill him, and someone else would have to take his place. The Clone Wars must happen, and Dooku was only a pawn in all of it. If he is dead, the Senate will be much more willing to use the clones without thinking that Dooku is secretly in charge. And as the call ended for Dooku on Geonosis, he put his own hands together. He and his master's plan was falling apart, but he had the entire droid army at his disposal. He could destroy Kamino, then invade Coruscant. He could take over the Republic by force, killing the Jedi if he must. But first, he must kill his master. And so he would take off to Coruscant. Meanwhile, on Kamino, the Jedi squad of Kenobi, Plo Koon, Shaak Ti, and Coleman Trevor landed their ship on the landing pad, moving inside to confront the Kaminoans. Once inside, Obi Wan guided them to the room where Prime Minister Lama Su resides. They moved through the halls, passing by many medical droids, Kaminoans, and clones as they prepared to finally see the war they were created for. Upon entering the room and finding the Prime Minister, the four Jedi ignited their lightsabers, demanding to know what was truly going on with the clones. Lama Su truly didn't understand what this was all about, and Plo Koon stepped forward, saying they know all about Tyrannus, Dooku. Truthfully, Lama Su thought Tyrannus was a Jedi. He was being deceived, but Lama Su assured the Jedi that he wants no trouble, and he offered to show the Jedi the records of everything Tyrannus requested with the clone army being created. The Jedi agreed, then followed Lama Su through the facilities where they would learn the truth. They came upon a records console, and Lama Su showed them that Sifo Dyas was the one who requested the clone army, but not long after, the man called Tyrannus offered up Jango Fett as the genetic template, while also ordering that the Kaminoans install an inhibitor chip in all of the clones, to ensure that they never betray the Jedi or go rogue. This obviously made no sense to the Jedi. Why would Dooku install a chip to keep the Jedi safe? So the Jedi asked to see the details of this chip, and Lama Su would pull them up. It was a safeguard to keep the clones in line, while also being a safeguard against rogue Jedi. And in order to keep them in line, there were 150 contingency orders in the chip. The Jedi wouldn't have thought much of this had they not known that Dooku created the army. So together, they sifted through the orders until they came upon Order 66. This one was much more in-depth than the others, as if it was personally created and hidden away. This order was designed to completely alter the clones' minds into thinking all Jedi were traitors to the Republic, and the clones were to execute them immediately, no hesitation, no matter the age or rank. This was terribly grim, and the Jedi ordered all the clones to go through extensive removal of these chips before they're ever allowed on the battlefield. Lama Su protested, but the Jedi didn't want to hear any of it. The chips were to be removed, or the operations on Kamino would be shut down for good, and so Lama Su was out of options, as the mass removal would begin. On Coruscant, Darth Sidious waited in the lair for Dooku to arrive. If everything went according to plan, the two of them would be meeting to discuss their plans going well. The Clone Wars were supposed to be well underway, but instead, everything has changed. Today, Sidious knew Dooku would die for his failures, and soon enough, Dooku landed in the open hangar, walking out to meet with his master. They'd both told each other this would be a peaceful, mutual meeting to discuss strategy, but upon coming face to face, there was no denying the feelings here. Both of them were here to kill each other. Dooku would pull out his red blade, telling Sidious he does not need him any longer. He will tear the Republic down, rebuild it himself. And Sidious simply smiled, igniting his own red blade. The two of them would get into a battle position, circling each other, eyes locked on each other. Dooku's face was more serious than ever. While Sidious smiled, holding back laughter, he was engulfed by the darkness. And Sidious moved in first, striking at Dooku, forcing the Sith apprentice backwards. Dooku would block every strike, but Sidious was strong in his offensive push. Eventually, Dooku was able to grab Sidious's wrist, stabbing forward, but Sidious was ready, kicking Dooku in the gut. Dooku stumbled away, recovering for a moment before going back on his own offensive, spinning around Sidious, engaging in a lightsaber lock, pushing Sidious towards the ground. Sidious winced as the saber got closer to his face before he was able to disengage and spin away. The two of them continued their duel, aggressive strikes throughout the layer, clashing their red blades against each other again and again, until Sidious was able to spin and knock Dooku to the ground. He tried to stab at Dooku, but Dooku used the Force, holding Sidious's blade in place before hitting him with Force lightning. Sidious fell to the floor, then got up angrily and swung at Dooku, but Dooku flipped over him to get back into a battle stance. Sidious smiled again as Dooku ran in aggressively, his own anger overtaking him as he swung for a slash at Sidious's face, then went in for a stab. But Sidious grabbed Dooku's wrist now, twisting Dooku's own blade into his side. Dooku yelled in pain as Sidious pushed it further in, then let Dooku stumble to the floor. Dooku looked to the blade in his side, and Sidious would go in for the final, killing stab. But Dooku used any strength remaining to once more hold the blade in place with the Force. But now Sidious pushed forward, stabbing into Dooku's hands, and as Sidious finally penetrated the Force to stab through Dooku's heart, Dooku was able to remove his own blade from his side, driving it through Sidious. Both of them fell to the floor together and looked out of the hangar window. The sun was rising on Coruscant, erasing the darkness from the long night, and as the light of the sun hit them, both of them would die together. It would be weeks until their bodies were discovered, and in that time the galaxy was in chaos, as the leader of the Republic and the leader of the Separatists were missing. Newt Gunray and Wat Tambor panicked, and they did eventually launch an attack on Naboo, trying to kill Padme and her supporters, and this attack would launch the Republic into action. Clone troopers that had their chips removed were sent out into the war, and they were led by the Jedi. Various battles would take place, but the Separatists were completely caught off guard by the clone army. This small war would only last a few months before the Separatists were forced to surrender and finally begin true negotiations. These negotiations would be led by Padme and her Jedi protector, Anakin Skywalker, and they would be peaceful as the Separatist Senate separated themselves from Newt Gunray and the Separatist Council. In the end, the truth about Palpatine and Dooku would be discovered, and the Separatists and Republic would come together to eradicate this corruption, electing Mina Bonteri and Bail Organa as co-chancellors to save this republic. The Jedi would aid in helping eradicate corruption, going to various planets not in service of the Senate, but for the people, and they would find out which senators are truly doing their duties correctly. Anakin and Padme would still get married, but it would not be a secret this time. Anakin would be allowed to stay in the Jedi Order, as the Jedi closely watched to see how this attachment affected him. The Jedi Council realized they were in the wrong about a great many things, so they considered changing things, even their attachment style. Anakin said he could simply not let go of Padme, telling the Council of the Tuscans, and this did give the Council great fear of what Anakin was capable of, but they knew they could just closely watch him and hopefully help him find the light in all of this as the galaxy recovered from the short war. Jango Fett and Boba Fett would reside together on a small, hidden away planet, getting a nice place, still carrying out bounties, but living their life out happily together as Boba and Jango would both become fierce bounty hunters as a father-son duo. And folks, that is our story for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I was watching Attack of the Clones last night, as one does, as I do all the time. It's my favorite movie ever. I've probably seen it, well, a lot. Anyways, I was watching it, and yeah, the Jedi requested for Obi Wan to bring Jango in, so I thought, hey, what if that happened? And this is my take on that whole thing. Another story on Attack of the Clones that I kind of want to do is what if Dooku was killed on Geonosis, so let me know if you want to see that. Let me know what other ideas in general you want to see. Appreciate you guys for watching. Just to talk about it a bit, yeah, I actually really did enjoy this one quite a bit. I like doing the Dooku and Sidious kill each other. the Sith just kind of can't help but destroy themselves. So that was a big theme for me. Otherwise, yeah, just kind of, I think this story made sense. If you don't, dang it. But thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought. Leave a comment. Please leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And I'll see you in the next video.